Okay, let's unpack this. Imagine your organization is just drowning in data, right?
Yeah.
Struggling to make sense of it all, constantly hitting bottlenecks, data silos everywhere. We're talking about a real data deluge here. IDC predicts something like 180 zettabytes of data by 2025.
Okay.
That's huge. And clearly, the traditional ways of managing all this information, where everything funnels through one central team, they're just not cutting it anymore.
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? It's not just the sheer volume, though that's part of it. It's also the exploding complexity. Think about all the diverse data sources, cloud platforms, SaaS apps, IoT devices streaming in real time. So the big question becomes, how do you not just store this massive influx, but actually harness its power? How do you get real actionable insights out quickly without getting completely buried?
Exactly. And that's the core challenge we're really diving into today. Our mission really is to explore this thing called data mesh. It's billed as a pretty revolutionary approach to data management. We'll unpack what it is, why companies are starting to adopt it, what the significant hurdles are, and crucially, how you might navigate this kind of transformation to get a real competitive advantage. So this deep dive is for you, whether you're, prepping for a big meeting, just trying to catch up on data strategy, or maybe you're just curious about where data management is heading. So let's start where most places have been, right? The traditional model, centralized data management. For decades, IT departments were kind of the gatekeepers, held all the reins, oversaw the infrastructure, the storage, managed the risk. And I mean, there were good reasons for that, weren't there? You got standardized security, compliance, maybe efficient resource allocation sometimes. But that centralized control, it also created a growing list of headaches, big ones.
Oh, absolutely. It really did. The sort of nightmare scenario of a purely centralized system often looks like severe data sprawl. Files, databases just scattered everywhere makes it incredibly hard to track, to secure, even just to know what data you have. And this model, it can lead to a fundamental loss of granular control over access, over quality, especially when organizations get bigger. And maybe the most critical point, that central bottleneck creates a single point of failure. It leaves the whole organization vulnerable to disruptions, delays, even cyber attacks if that one point gets compromised. It just stifles agility.
Right, that stifling of agility, that feels like the key driver here. And it's precisely why we're seeing this pretty significant paradigm shift happening. Organizations are realizing that true speed, real innovation, it often comes from decentralization, where data ownership, accountability, it's distributed, spread across different departments, different teams. It sounds exciting, but also complicated.
Exactly. It is complex. But this decentralization, when it's done right, and crucially, within guardrails set by central IT or platform function, it shifts accountability directly to individual domain owners. They get significant autonomy, real control over their data products. They decide how their data is accessed, how it's shared, how it's used. What's really interesting here is how this can foster a much more dynamic, more responsive data governance environment. It empowers the people closest to the data, the ones who understand it best, to make the decisions. And that's critical for things like GDPR, CCPA compliance, ensuring data sovereignty, control over data, regardless of where it sits. It's about trusting the teams.
Okay, so if that's the bigger shift happening, decentralization, what does that mean for data mesh specifically? Let's dive into the actual ideas behind it. This concept, introduced by Zamek Degani back in 2019, right? It's basically a decentralized self-service approach. It organizes data around specific business domains. It sounds a lot like the shift we saw in software engineering, moving from big monolithic applications to, agile microservices. Is that a fair comparison?
That's a very good analogy, actually, yes. And to really get data mesh, you need to understand its four core principles. First, and this is probably the biggest cultural shift, is domain-oriented data ownership. So responsibility for data management. It shifts away from a central IT team. It goes directly to cross-functional domain teams. Think, marketing, sales, customer service, logistics, whatever makes sense for the business. These teams, they become accountable for collecting, transforming, and providing data related to their specific function. So for example, a retailer might have a product domain team. They own all the data about clothing products. Then maybe a website behavior domain team managing site visitor analytics. So if you have a question about product inventory data, you go straight to the product team, not some separate central data department.
Wow, okay. That sounds like a huge organizational change. Putting that responsibility directly onto the domain teams, what does that actually imply for them?
Well, it leads directly into the second principle, data as a product. And this one is absolutely crucial. Data assets, they're no longer just, raw materials lying around or exhaust fumes from processes. They are treated as finished products, and the rest of the organization, they're the customers for these data products. Think about it like building a physical product. It needs to be high quality, easy to use, clearly labeled right. Well, a good data product needs similar qualities. It needs to be discoverable, easy to find, maybe in a central data catalog. It needs to be addressable, have a unique programmatic address, following clear naming standards so systems can find it. It needs to be trustworthy, defining service level objectives, SLOs, SLIs, that accurately reflect reality. Like, are these customer address verified? How up to date is this inventory count? And finally, it needs to be self-describing with clear syntax, clear semantics. Users should understand what the data means without needing a translator.
Okay, so it's really shifting the mindset from data just being a source, like a database somewhere, to data being a service or a product that has to meet certain standards for its customers within the organization.
Precisely. That's a great way to put it. And that thinking naturally leads to the third principle, self-serve data infrastructure. Because if domain teams are now building and managing these data products, they need the right tools. And they shouldn't have to build that tooling from scratch every single time. That'd be chaos. So you have a centralized data platform team. Their job is to provide the underlying capabilities. Things like storage, transformation engines, data pipeline orchestration, source control, caching, all that plumbing. This allows the domain teams to build and manage their data products more autonomously. It helps avoid duplication of effort, and it helps prevent that dreaded shadow IT where teams build their own isolated systems. It's kind of a division of labor. Data engineers on the platform team manage the tech, the infrastructure, and the business-focused domain teams. They manage the data itself, the products. It empowers autonomy, but within a shared, robust framework.
Got it. So platform team provides the workbench, domain teams build the products on it.
Exactly. And the fourth principle ties it all together. Federated computational governance. Security, compliance, quality standards. These become a shared responsibility. It's federated. So leadership, maybe the central governance group, sets the global standards and policies, the rules of the road for everyone. But the domains have autonomy in how they implement those standards for their specific data products. And the key here, the computational part, is embedding these policies as code directly into the data products and automating the compliance checks as much as possible. This way, the system kind of self-governs, or at least flags issues automatically, rather than relying solely on, manual reviews and checklists after the fact.
That's a fascinating balance, establishing global standards but allowing domain teams autonomy. How do you strike that balance effectively? It sounds like it could get messy, making sure everyone's actually following the rules in their own way.
That's where the computational aspect is so important. Automating the checks, making compliance part of the infrastructure itself. And, it's a really stark contrast to those traditional centralized ETL pipelines, those extract, transform, load processes, where you often have one single team that's just completely backlogged, totally disconnected from both the people producing the data and the people needing to consume it. It leads to huge delays, lots of frustration. Data mesh really aims to flip that whole model on its head.
Okay, so given this whole architectural shift, this flipping the model, what's the actual payoff here? Why are businesses really starting to gravitate towards this? It sounds like a lot of work, a lot of change. It can't just be hype, right? There must be some tangible return on investment, something beyond just, tidier IT.
Oh, the potential benefits are really compelling. At its core, data mesh is trying to solve that fundamental problem of organizational agility when it comes to data. So first, you get increased scalability and flexibility. Because domain teams manage their own data products, the whole system can scale more efficiently. Organizations can adapt to changing needs much faster. We saw this with A&Z Institutional Division, for instance. They explicitly adopted data mesh to get greater scalability. Second, it really fosters enhanced collaboration and innovation. This idea of data democratization. It empowers teams all across the organization. They can discover and use high-quality data for decision-making, for experimentation, without constantly having to wait in line for a central IT team to provision something for them.
Right, so it's really about empowering everyone to be a data user, not just a few specialists in a central team.
Exactly. And the direct result of that empowerment is often faster time to value. Data mesh decouples those domain teams from slow, lengthy central approval processes. It enables quicker iterations, faster insights. We've seen examples where projects achieved like 2x faster time to market compared to the old ways. Also, and this is a big one, when you have direct data ownership by the domain experts, the people who really understand the data, you inherently get improved data quality right at the source. That drastically reduces errors downstream, makes analytics much more reliable and streamlined, and it fundamentally reduces those central bottlenecks and data silos we talked about earlier simply by assigning clear ownership. Plus, having a central registry or catalog where all these domain-owned data products are listed, that actively works against creating new silos.
That makes sense. Ownership drives quality, and discoverability prevents silos.
Precisely. And ultimately, all of this empowers the data consumers. The self-serve infrastructure gives users, whether they're business analysts, data scientists, whoever, quicker, bottleneck-free access to reliable data. Data scientists, for example, can perform analytics much, much faster. There's also potential for cost efficiency, moving away from maybe cumbersome, expensive batch processing towards more real-time streaming where appropriate. This gives better visibility into resource allocation and storage costs, too. And finally, let's not forget security. It can significantly strengthen security and compliance. Data mesh enforces security policies within domains and between domains. It allows for centralized monitoring and auditing, which ties back nicely to those data sovereignty principles like GDPR or CCPA that we mentioned.
Wow. That's a powerful list of potential benefits. It really reframes data, doesn't it? Not just as something to manage, but as a strategic asset that can drive competitive advantage. As you're listening to this, maybe think about how these benefits might apply in your own context. How could your organization benefit from empowering teams this way? Treating data like a product, it's food for thought. Okay, this all sounds incredibly promising. Almost too good to be true, maybe. But like any major shift, any revolution, it's definitely not a silver bullet. There are battle scars. It's not always smooth sailing, is it? And it sounds like many organizations actually hit pretty significant roadblocks trying to implement this.
That's the hard truth, yeah. The reality is, there's a stat floating around that something like 67% of data mesh implementations fail to deliver their promised benefits. That's a high number. One of the primary pitfalls is just the sheer complexity of implementation and the high initial overhead. It demands really significant fundamental changes to existing infrastructure, yes, but also to processes and maybe most importantly to culture. It's costly, it's resource intensive, and often it doesn't provide immediate visible returns. That takes time.
Yeah, I can just imagine the pushback from teams who are, comfortable with the old way, the centralized control.
Absolutely. Organizational resistance is a major hurdle. This is such a profound shift in how data is managed, how it's governed. You're bound to get pushback from teams used to that central control. It requires substantial change management, a lot of communication, continuous training. And while decentralization encourages autonomy, ensuring consistent data quality and dealing with interoperability challenges across all these distributed owners, that can get incredibly complex. If domain teams don't properly adhere to those global standards we talked about, data mesh can ironically end up creating new data silos, just in a different distributed form.
Oh, interesting. So you solve one silo problem and potentially create another if you're not careful.
Exactly. Then there's the increased maintenance overhead. Suddenly you have multiple data products, multiple pipelines, different services to maintain across many different teams. That's more moving parts. And we absolutely cannot ignore the serious skill set and talent gap. This is a big one. Data mesh requires new skills, new mindsets for data professionals. Finding, recruiting, and then retaining people with this expertise is really challenging. I saw a figure suggesting there are maybe only about 500 qualified data mesh architects globally right now. That's not many.
Wow, only 500. That really highlights the challenge. So would it be fair to say the biggest hurdle isn't just the tech itself, but really the organizational readiness, the cultural maturity needed to truly embrace this decentralized thinking?
I think that's precisely it. And it helps explain why Gartner, in their 2022 hype cycle, put data mesh in the innovation trigger phase, but predicted it might become obsolete before plateaus. No. They mainly attributed that to the high maturity level required. They estimated only about 18% of organizations were really ready for it back in 2021. Now, that view is definitely debated, but it does underscore the significant hurdles involved. And we see these common failure patterns emerge because of this. There's what some call the Conway's law trap. That's where organizations try to implement data mesh without changing their underlying organizational structure. So you end up with distributed complexity still feeding into central bottlenecks. Doesn't work. Then there's the platform maturity mirage, rushing into data mesh before those core self-serve platform capabilities are truly mature and robust. This just leads to domain teams spending way too much time fighting with infrastructure instead of building valuable data products. And finally, that skill shortage cascade. Underestimating the specialized skills needed, which leads to sky-high hiring costs, retention challenges, and ultimately, reliability and performance issues with the mesh itself.
Okay, wow. So it really does sound like a potential minefield if you're not careful. But the good news, hopefully, is that there are clear strategies emerging. Tools, maybe. ways to address these exact pain points and help ensure success. If those are the hurdles, what helps us actually clear them?
You're right, there are definitely ways forward. Two key enablers that are getting a lot of attention are Unified Data Management, UDM software, and the concept of data contracts. Think of UDM as a kind of linchpin. It provides a unified software solution that spans across data integration, quality management, governance, security, covering the whole ecosystem. It really helps pave the way for decentralization in some crucial ways. It can streamline ownership tracking, promote collaborative workflows between domains, help ensure consistency across data products, centralize certain governance functions like cataloging, manage the data lifecycle, make auditing and compliance easier, and enhance overall security and privacy enforcement. It provides a common ground.
So UDM provides the integrated toolkit across the mesh.
Kind of, yeah. And then to tackle those specific pain points we just discussed, like high transformation costs, those potential new silos, the added complexity, the ownership fuzziness data contracts are proving really invaluable. These are basically formal agreements between the data producers, the domain teams creating the data product, and the data consumers, the teams using it. They explicitly define the expected data quality, the structure or schema, the semantics, the terms of use. So for high transformation costs, by clearly defining expectations up front in the contract, you minimize the need for consumers to do extensive, costly transformations downstream. It avoids rework. To combat potential data silos, these contracts foster interoperability and standardization. They provide clear, agreed-upon interfaces for sharing data across different domain boundaries.
Okay, so they're almost like the API definition for your data products, setting clear expectations for interaction.
Precisely. That's a great analogy. They formalize those relationships, which actually keeps the management less complicated, not more. They provide transparency into dependencies, streamline the pipelines. And crucially, governance policies like security rules, access controls, retention policies can often be embedded directly into these contracts, helping automate compliance checks. And finally, for those tricky ownership and governance challenges, data contracts explicitly define the roles, the responsibilities, the usage policies for each specific data product. This aligns perfectly with that federated governance model and really helps enforce accountability. They turn implicit assumptions into explicit, testable agreements.
That makes a lot of sense. It's clear how these kinds of solutions, UDM providing the unified platform view and data contracts defining the interfaces, can help organizations really balance that domain autonomy with the necessary centralized oversight. It sounds like it's about turning those potential problems into manageable processes, making the inherent mess of the mesh actually workable for you, the organization implementing it. So this transformation, it clearly requires a deliberate, thought-out approach. It's definitely not flipping a switch overnight. It's a journey. So for anyone listening now, maybe thinking, okay, this sounds interesting, maybe relevant for us, what's the practical roadmap? How does someone actually get started implementing this?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Well, the first and maybe the most important piece of advice is almost always go for a phased implementation. Don't try to boil the ocean. Don't try to overhaul everything all at once. Start small. Pick a pilot project, maybe 1 or 2 domains, where there's clear, quantifiable business value to be gained. The idea is kind of like remodeling a house while you're still living in it. You update room by room, incrementally. Prove the value in that first pilot, learn from it, and then expand.
Right. Start small, prove the value, learn, and then scale up. Makes sense?
Yeah. Second, this is absolutely crucial for something this big. Obtain executive buy-in and maintain it. Data mesh requires significant ongoing investment. We're talking typically 18 to 24 months just to reach a positive ROI. The break-even point is often around month 22, according to some studies. So you really need to showcase the long-term strategic value, align the data mesh initiative with broader company objectives. That's key to securing and keeping that top-level commitment.
Yeah, 22 months to break even. That definitely requires patient leadership.
It does. Third, you absolutely need to build a strong self-serve platform team. We talked about this earlier. While data mesh decentralizes the data ownership, you still need that central platform team. They're responsible for building and managing the underlying self-serve infrastructure. They provide the essential tools, the data catalog, lineage tracking, security controls, monitoring dashboards, the core infrastructure components. This team ensures the foundation is robust and truly empowers those domain teams to operate autonomously and efficiently. And fourth, really focus on building trustworthy data products and embedding observability. Domains can't truly own their data if they can't see how it's behaving, how it's being used, if it's meeting quality standards. So those self-serve capabilities provided by the platform, They must include things like encryption, versioning, schema definition and validation, discovery mechanisms, governance policy enforcement, lineage tracking, monitoring, and clear quality metrics. This ensures that data products are reliable, transparent, and builds trust across the whole organization.
That's really practical advice. Start small, get buy-in, build a platform, focus on trust.
And we are seeing real-world success stories emerge now. PayPal, for instance, used decentralization to improve their data quality, become more agile in responding to market changes, and really fast-track decisions, which ultimately led to better user satisfaction. Zalando, the big European fashion retailer, they significantly magnified their data quality and empowered their domain teams through decentralized ownership. And that ANZ institutional division example again, they successfully pivoted to a data product mindset. They used a federated data platform built on AWS to tackle silos, improve operational efficiency, standardize their tooling. What's interesting there is they implemented key metrics right from the start, things like cost transparency per domain and tracking domain adoption rates to help them continually refine their approach. It shows it's an ongoing evolution, not a one-time project.
Those are great examples, really powerful. And it brings up a question many listeners might have. Okay, is my organization actually ready for this? We came across a neat way to think about this, sort of a qualitative data mesh score. Just consider these factors for your own organization: the quantity and diversity of your data sources, the size of your current data team, the number of distinct business domains that rely heavily on data, how often your central data engineering team feels like a bottleneck, and how high a priority data governance already is for your leadership. Now, tally up a rough qualitative assessment. If your overall score across these feels high, let's just conceptually say, above a 30 on a scale where maybe 1 is low and 10 is high for each factor, then our sources suggest you might be in the sweet spot. You might have the scale, the complexity, and maybe the pain points that make data mesh a really compelling option to explore seriously. It's a journey for sure, but some organizations are definitely better positioned to start that journey now. Wow, what a journey we've been on today. We've really covered a lot of ground. We traveled from the limitations of those old centralized data systems, explored the decentralized promise of data mesh, highlighted its pretty immense potential benefits, but we also acknowledged the inherent complexities, the real pitfalls you need to watch out for. And importantly, we discovered how strategic approaches, things like unified data management and using robust data contracts, can really help navigate those challenges, helping to potentially unlock significant ROI and build a powerful data-driven competitive advantage.
Yeah, and if we just connect this back to the bigger picture for a moment, the future of data management, it seems, isn't about throwing out structure altogether. It's more about finding smart ways to strategically empower those closest to the data, the domain experts, while still maintaining those crucial overarching standards for quality, security, and interoperability. Which actually raises a pretty interesting question to think about. In this world of ever-increasing data, and with this shift towards data becoming a product, what new types of data products do you, our listeners, think might emerge in the future? Things we perhaps can't even quite imagine today.
Ooh, that is a fascinating thought to chew on. What data products haven't even been conceived of yet? Well, on that note, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the data mesh revolution. We really encourage you to consider how these principles might reshape your own understanding of data and how you could potentially harness its power more effectively within your own organization. Until next time.